Today, I just want to talk a bit more about what R0 actually means. Okay, R0, in terms of epidemiology, is the number of second cases per primary in a totally susceptible population. And then there's been recent informative and misinformed information regarding what R0 representation and the scaremongering upon the public. Because for epidemic to occur, we need to calculate the basic reproduction ratio, which is known as R0, for the possibilities of a secondary infection per primary. For human to human transmission, is that R0 has to be greater than 1. Yes, but okay, they have calculated that R0 is between 3.5 and 4, on which R0 is basically the reproduction ratio, basically, of the number of infected cases, which is associated with the statistical cases which is incorporated in the mathematical algorithm of beta. Beta is the transmission parameter, the rate on which one person from the other gets infected per individual, and it depends on the number of people, which is the population, and the population is deterministic on the number of people that get infected, the susceptible population, the endemic population, and the people either get removed from the population or recover from the infected cases. And basically, gamma is the rate on which the rate of recovery and the birth of infections, which is mu, and nu is the death rate, on which all this is associated. And mathematicians and epidemiologists have calculated that the R0 is between 3.5 to 4. And I may initiate that R0, even though R0 is between 4 and 5, it's not deterministic on the nature of the propagation of the transmission. Because basically, it's for example, one person who shows no symptoms of infection has the possibility to infect another person, on which I've calculated that from the analysis that the cases which is situated in the source center of Wuhan province in China has associated with a large accumulation of transmission. And then if you follow the SIR model, which is the susceptible, infected, and removal model in terms of epidemiology, for infection to occur, R0 must be greater than 1, which is deterministic on the calculation of the Jacobian, and the stability of the associated thing, which is deterministic on the determinant and the Jacobian, including the trace, has to be less than 0, and the deterministic value of the determinant of the Jacobian of the SIR model, which is standardized from the mathematical modeling of this epidemic of the of the novel coronavirus NCOV, which is associated with SARS and MERS, on which I believe that this would stabilize as basically the rate of transmission might stabilize due to a epidemic shift in the NCOV of the cell. Anyway, I may resurrect that even R0 is greater than 1. But mathematicians, biologists, and epidemiologists and pharmaceutical organizations and working closely to try and resist the medication, and which is applied to in terms of creating and research on the race to find a vaccine which is suitable, and there's certain antiviral drugs which in the news there's recently heard about Remdesivir and other things like Cytoxan and other things like oseltamivir and Tamiflu. And I may resurrect that basically antiviral drugs are drugs to support and assist with resisting the biological mechanism on which the viral infection of the NCOV enters the cell to invade our host cells, to invade into our nuclei and produce replicates, on which we have produced antiviral drugs like Samifir and Tamiflu, which has been researched to resist upon change due to histidine H274 N294 asparagine to tariphine, on which these associate with the hydrogen bonding, on which basically scientists and epidemiologists has worked research basically different antiviral drugs which is associated with the sialic acid of the hemagglutinin, which is processed on the nucleoadenizer of the coronal structure of the outer layer of the shell, which allows it, which we researchers are finding ways to bind its structure without any form of resistance, on which these antiviral drugs can be very, 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 very efficient. And these will suppress the symptoms and help, hopefully, hold hold the replicated variants in place of the cell membrane to allow escape to infest other host cells that make us ill. So maybe now I may discuss about what hemagglutinin is. Okay. I've gathered these resources from my analytical research from all the resources. Okay. These bear a minute. Okay. These hemagglutinins are packed closely tertiary quaternary structures glycoprotein. The structure in the outer surface layer is constituent of M and S proteins with spikes on the outer surface. They have HA, which is hemagglutininin, which is a form of glycoprotein made of constituents of amino acid from the 20 groups of 20 amino acids. Pneumadizer, which is Na, which is pneumadizer, which HA, hemagglutinin functionality, which the glycoprotein consists of various of amino acids, tyrosine, alanine, phenylalanine, tyrosine, glutamic acid, which have cells on the outer surface, which allows the virus to attach to infecting host cells, which are susceptible on the outer surface of the membrane to the human sialic acid, which is N-acyl numeric acid, and made of hydrocarbons, amines, carboxyls, and aryl groups, and with hydroxys. There are called binding residues, which is also a pneumatizer, which allows for the final stage of the formulation of a replicate RNA protein combined, and to the NA nucleic gland allows the cell to cleave away from the sialic acid, which gives it the sustainability to infect other host cells. There's two methods on the initial stage of infestation on the cell. Attached to sialic acid cells in the respiratory system, which enters the cell through endocytosis. The first stage of intervention is scientists' creation of vaccine, which has been approved by the medicine faculty and regulations of all pharmaceuticals, which have to go through a process of test phase analysis and suitability trials, which are feasible for the trials on the humans before the formalization and the process into the market. Scientists and virologists to counteract how the viral infection and the analysis of the mechanism, which the creation of antiviral drugs, which inhibits the replication of the virus through interventions of RNA on the process of protein RNA transcription by creation of RNA transcription inhibitors of different forms of antiviral drugs, which, for example, includes cenediphen and ribavirin on HIV, on which is to the productivity of the cumulative amount of cells of the variants that replicates from a nucleus that contains strands of DNA. Another strategic approach is to deflect an intervention at the final stage, the creation of NA-nucleotide inhibitors that scientists, biologists, and pharmacologists creations of drugs which form similar characteristics of the sialic acid and the Nu5 N-acyl numeric acid binds to the Na glycoprotein event. Activation allows virus to bind away from the cell membrane to give it the ability to infect other host cells that make us ill. Another is the creation of vaccination. The creation of a virus, which is the implementation and the embedding of a virus which has been genetically modified respective to the NCOV, MERS, which was Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, SAR, which is part of the coronavirus ranges of the groups of NCOVs. Strange with creation of antibodies, which binds to the residues, which are small, which are called antigens, which are like antibodies, are made up of strands of protein similar to the Y structure, and which is armed to the strength, the dimension length, gives ability to act as surface virus to disrupt the NA and HO glycoprotein from invading our cells, on which this will destroy the virus. Due to the replication of the cells, there's been associated disruption to the resistance at the binding residue due to DNA shift, antigenic shift of the DNA RNA, which prevents mechanisms. These antibodies produced in the plasma cells, which is associated with the immunity system. They act as neutralizers to the virus strain and pathogenic bacteria associated with symptoms that weakens our immune system and cause fatigue and other health complications. The body is an innate immune system, which the plasma region is the creation and defense mechanism, production of T cells, the helper cells, and the creation of antibodies, which are associated with the process of immunoglobulin, which is the secretion of immunoglobulin from the T cells, which when the antigen HS virus or bacteria enters the cells in the plasma, which can contain red blood cells, white blood cells, which are lymphocytes and phagocytes, which is secretion of NK, which are natural killer T cells, which are processed on various groups of immunoglobulin of antibodies associated with the Y structure. Groups like differentiate from the IgM, the IgA, the IgD, the IgE, and the IgG. The antibody of the immunoglobulin is associated with the side chains, side low chain, bonded by sulfide linkages between the hinges, which are receptors of the protein receptive to the antigen. The pathogenic and virus NCOV, SARS, MERS, it has light side chains at the sides of the arms, the exterior, heavy chain interior, which the hinge is sustained by sulfide linkages, which bond them together. And at the side, there are quite a lot of carboxylic sugar molecules made of irene or benzyl amino acids. These are series of glycoproteins, which are surface antigen binding site, which is antigen binding site, which the glycylic glycitate, which allows it's made up of constituents of various of amino acids, which includes histidine, tyrosine, and methionine. These antibodies' abilities to bind receptive of the residues, IFM beta AB or BAB, which will not affect the functionality of the immunoglobulin. This allows the neutralization of various antivirals and vaccines or NA neutralizers, known as neuroadaminase neutralizers. Medical epidemiologists and biological pharmaceutical interventions and research critical analysis of genetic sequence of the NCOV virus associated with the pathogenicity of the infection is to weaken the replication of the virus through genetic engineering, alteration, perturbing the antigenic shift of the protein, which weakens the virus. Injected in our body, in which these T cells, the recognition of the genetic makeup and the genetic sequence and the creation accumulation of immunoglobulin antibodies, which would destroy or destabilize through immunoglobulin monomers from IgA to IgM subgroups associated categorization of the antibody or pentamer. So from the J linkage or diamonds, from the interactions through the chemical and biological process of deactivating the mechanisms and preventing all the virus from invading other cells, which the virus or biological consequences, capacity in the access to the DNA in the nuclei through RNA transcription, generation of virus, which makes us ill and virions. The protein ability creation of immunoglobulin, diamonds, monomers, which serve and act as neutralization antibodies to specific residues and NA and HA activity that prevents the virus from the initial stage attachment to salicylic acid from the HA, which is the hemagglutinin protein, M and S protein associated with the NCOV virus. The creation from the immunoglobulin IgD to IgE monomers, which could be clubbed together, which enables the B cells and B cells and as the T cell, this secrete T cells, the helper cells, able to engulf the virus through phagocytosis, more sustainable efficiency, which attach to the antigen through chemical neutralization inhibitors of NAHA. Inhibitors of productions of antiviral interventions include also Tamiflu, Relenza, and Samanafir, and Paramifir. The other process that immunoglobulin of antibody attaches to the antigen and creation of opsonization, which the immunoglobulin attaches to the virus and antigen and the NCOV, which the T helper cells have the lymphocytes, the macrophage nuclei receptive to immunoglobulin type, and that allows the various antibodies to the various virus has the phagocyte engulf and destroy the virus to prevent the cell from further replication, to disrupt and intervention with other normal functionality cells. A pathogen attacked by antibodies engulfed by the macrophage and destroy the virus. Another procedure through the release of NK natural killer cells through complement activation from the process of secretion from the immune system of cells which produce NKT cells, which attach to the antigen, and the hemoglobin, which is attached to the NK cell natural killer, which release cytokines, cytokines, which destroy the virus from the immobilization and replication of virus, release of T cells, and the NK with the cytokine which destroyed the NCOV. The activation of natural killer T cells by hemoglobin of the antibody initiates the secretion of cytotoxicity mechanism, which is ADCC, which is known as antibody-dependent cell-mediated cytotoxicity of release of cytokines, which inhibit and deactivate the disruptive biological process of the virus NCOV. Cytokines are produced by the B lymphocytes and the T lymphocytes and macrophage of the immune system. Natural killer T associated with the release of cytotoxins which destroy the virus. The white B cells associated with the production of these antibodies, associated with the immune defense mechanisms against infectious bacterial and viral infections that make us ill and weak. So basically, scientists are working on a vaccination, which basically we have to understand more about the genetic makeup of which scientists, epidemiologists around the world globally are working together to understand more about the NCOVs and its associated consequences. And basically, scientists there's a process of which vaccination is made on, which is the vitro and the vivo and the vitro. And the vivo includes cultural of cells, allowing these NCOV cells to grow, and which they inhibit into normal cells to test its resistance and test functionalities against antigen. And we have to understand all these subgroups and subtypes on which is the best form of isotopes of these IgBs, which effectively weaken the capacity and the replication of the virus. And then these have to be tested upon basically like animals and references upon animals, and then human trials on which these are forms of theories of clinical trials before these are successfully produced into the market. And it's very important to understand these antiviral drugs and these vaccinations will not have an impact on the humanity. So basically, virologists and epidemiologists are working together to produce the process of antiviral drugs, which includes the ramifications and the rendering of Sanofi, which includes that there's no form of resistance when attacked due to the antigenic shift of the mutational of mutation RNA transcription of the virus that destroys our body, basically to weaken its ability, and basically in creation of vaccines which act as neutralizers upon the replications of virus from known as antibodies. The productions of antigens in our bodies which is weak and being genetically engineered, which are not up to the functionalities of a normal cell, to secrete our autoimmune system from our bodies to produce these forms of immunoglobulins, which is an antibody to attack and destroy the viruses in our bodies, which is the NCOV, to make us better. Thank you very much.